All right, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. Today we have a lovely guest author. Tade Thompson is here from the UK. Hi. I'm
Yay!
so glad you could make it at
Happy to be
midnight.
here. Yes, but don't worry, I don't sleep anyway, so it's no trouble.
Wow. So I wanted to have you on the show so that we could talk about Rosewater, and I'm sure you're not surprised that that's what I want to talk about. But this is actually a book with quite an interesting history, as I understand it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
You mean the publication history?
The publication history, yeah.
Okay, well, initially it was published by Small Press.
Mm-hmm.
I sold it to Apex Publications.
Mm-hmm.
I think it came out in 2016 initially. And it did quite well. It was a finalist for the Joseph Campbell. Joseph W. Campbell, rather. I need to be specific for that.
Yeah.
And it won the first Noma Award for Best Novel. And the Noma Award is for African works of speculative fiction.
Oh wow, cool.
Right. So that was the very first one. So it won that. What then happened is other things were happening in my life, like I had other things that I'd written. I realized that because to rewind a bit, I had a plan for my career. My plan was more like I will just make stuff, and all of it would, I would publish it wherever I wanted. I wasn't really interested in the venue of publication. I just wanted to express my stories.
Okay.
But it became too much. I needed an agent, basically. It was just too much. It was too much to deal with. There were phone calls from places. People were trying to option the books. So I basically got an agent, and my agent made the deal with Orbit. And so they bought it from Apex Publications, and that's how we got to where we are now.
Okay, so this is cool. And it came out this year then?
It came out in September, yes.
Very nice. Very nice. So, okay. So this is a cool book. Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
I mean, everybody here has to read it. That's like a requirement. I'm going to send you all to do homework, right? Just kidding. I don't want to sign homework, but like, this is a really awesome book. So, it's about, so I hesitate to say it's about aliens because so far I haven't seen aliens, but definitely alien presence is saturating everything. Was there a particular moment when you felt that this concept sort of came together for you?
So the way I'm not one of those big plotter type peoples. I'm a pantser. Okay. Which means I just basically launch myself off into space and hope that there is something to catch me when I fall. I rewrite really seriously and multiple times. But for the first draft, I tend to just launch off and start doing whatever. I had the basic idea for the type of telepathy, right? The type of mind reading. I had that from about 2011, and that was more about. It was because I read an article about two conjoined twins who were joined in the by the brain, and they could actually hear each other's thoughts.
Wow.
So what I wanted is that would be a good basis for some kind of telepathy. So rather than if you have telepathy, it will just be a kind of hand wavy. It's just that they could hear each other's thoughts. I would have an actual explanation for why they could hear each other's thoughts. In other words, there would be a conduit. There would be an actual conduit between people. So I then began, and this is what I often do this. I then began to ask myself, well, why would it exist? And I kind of follow the why to its natural conclusion. It was aliens. If you remember that meme of that guy with orange hair saying it was aliens. I don't want to say it was aliens, but it was aliens. That's kind of how, that's how I got to the conclusion. This is an invasion. I said, so I had an idea of that. But for me, ideas on their own are not enough to carry a book or
Yeah.
even a story. So I had to wait and explore until I could find the characters who could carry the book.
Yeah.
And what I'd actually done before is that I'd actually written up to 50,000 words of the novel before realizing that that point of view was not the correct point of view to tell the story from, and two, those characters couldn't carry the story the way I wanted it to. So I actually deleted and discarded 50,000 words and started again.
Wow.
Wow.
You know,
Well, but
yeah,
I mean, those were probably not lost words. There were probably a lot of really important ideas in there that served you in some manner.
well, yes, but okay, because what I realized is that I couldn't come at the ideas fully from that direction.
Mm.
And some of those characters, they actually survive in the final book. Some of what happened survives in the final book, but it's more like backstory, you know.
Okay.
But there's an entire, I think maybe if, one day, if there is an absolute edition of the book, I'll just include those 50,000 words as, excuse me, as some kind of bonus,
That would be cool.
Yeah. It's like I just realized that okay, I could explore it a bit more with a different character. So I had to start again and formulate another character. But this time the character was based more on someone that I knew. It was based on about 3 people that I used to know.
Mm.
And when I kind of explored the story, the idea from that perspective, then I realized, okay, fine, I've got a new person, and this person can explore the entire idea. And so I started again. And that was the initial evolution of the book.
That's cool.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Well, first of all, here is the meme you were talking about.
Yes, it was aliens.
It's my high-tech method of holding the phone up to the camera. Since this is dive into world building, it sounds like you just dive into writing. And I'm wondering if that 50,000 words is canon in your world, or is like kind of half canon. You don't feel bound by it in any way, or how did that draft constrain the creation of the new novel that wound up being written?
Okay, so the 50,000 words definitely is canon because everything that happened there still is in the world. It's it's backstory, but it's in the world as it is right now. So it's definitely canon. Like I said, it was more of shifting perspective to different characters.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing of the world building that was in the first 50,000 words, none of that was discarded at all. All of that happened.
Mm-hmm.
All of the whole infrastructure of the world is as it was. None of that has changed at all. And I should probably say that even though I tend to dive in, I don't dive in until I have thought for a long period of time about the world. So even though I'm saying, yes, I'm pantsing it, I don't start until I'm very sure where is this story going and what are the rules of the world that I'm about to jump into.
So 2 follow-up questions. One,
yes.
So you create the world before the characters, it sounds like, because you discarded point of view character and put in a new one. And the second question is, in the UK, do they call it trousering?
Okay, so it's not exactly like that. It was only like that. In other words, making the world and then making the characters. It was only like that for this book. I don't have a fixed way of doing it, but I have to have a character and I have to have the world before I actually start. It doesn't always work in the way that, okay, which comes first. So, for example, my novella Molly Southbourne, the character came first before the world did, for example. So it depends, but I won't start writing until I have both. I won't start. And the other thing is, I kind of use a video game. I use a video game mentality when I'm kind of creating the world itself. In other words, when you're playing a video game, the whole world is not rendered immediately. What is rendered is what the character that you're playing needs to know and what needs to see. So I tend to follow the character along with the plot and then render whatever is necessary. And then when I do the rewrites, I kind of connect everything that the characters had to interact with, make it into a full world. that way. Sounds a little bit contradictory, but it's not. At least it's not in my head.
Well, I mean, so at one point I wrote an article about the difference between world building in a short story and world building in a novel. And the metaphor that I use there is that it's the difference between being inside a house and being outside a house. And the point with being inside the house is you only need to know what's inside the house. And then if you hit a window, you need to know what's outside of that window.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
So
yes.
In a way, it's similar to what you're talking about. You need to know what the character is interacting with, and basically what the views look like from that spot. But not necessarily more than that.
Yes, exactly. And but once the character has seen it, then it becomes real. In other words, that then becomes the world. Mm-hmm. Because every time that person and any other person goes to that place, they have to see what the character saw there. Mm-hmm. So each time the character goes somewhere or encounters a new thing, it is almost as if the character is creating the world as they go along. They are a kind of God. But that's not, in a sense, philosophically different from what we do in our real lives. Because again, people say the world is an illusion that we create with our senses. People don't exactly experience the world in the same way. So it's consistent with that kind of reality.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So Cliff, does that answer your question?
Yeah, and again, beautifully, it leads to even more questions, but I'm going to let other people talk right now because I've been talking
too much. To answer the second part of your question, we don't call it trousering.
That was the really important one.
So I'm hoping that you can give us a small window onto, I believe his name is Caro. Is that his name? Onto Caro's character and what makes him an appropriate character to create this world and also interact with it.
Okay. So I'll say what makes him appropriate first. What makes him appropriate is the fact that he is a character that we can follow him in a first person narrative, but because he can read people's minds, we can cheat and have an omniscient kind of, because he can see into other people's heads. So because of that, the initial characters that I had, they didn't have that ability. They weren't sensitive, so they didn't have that ability at all. But with him, we can have a close-up on his mind and his world and his life. At the same time, we can look into other people's heads. So he can know things that an ordinary first-person narrative would not be able to do, would not be able to see. So he knows more, which would in a book not about psychics, it would be head hopping.
Yes, yeah.
But he can do that. He has a reason to do that, and this it gave me the ability to have a narrow focus, but go as wide as I wanted to when he encountered other characters. Mm-hmm. So it gave me that freedom. The other thing is that, go on.
No, you keep going.
Okay. The other thing is that what I did with this character is I actually made the reader also a mind reader. Whoever is reading the novel is also a mind reader. And the reason I did that is because Caro himself he's an unsavory character. But I wanted the reader to also be complicit in that, to understand that, okay, look, you are also looking into other people's heads. You are having a voyeuristic experience of other people's lives. You know that these thoughts that he's having are thoughts that you yourself could possibly have, even though you would not say them, but you could think them. So because of that, I wanted some kind of sympathy for him, even though he's not a sympathetic character. So a little bit of sympathy, not so much, but some. So that's kind of what made him, in my opinion, the right person the right point of view from which to tell this story. So because he is affected by it, so he comments on it and he is affected by what goes on. This is probably going to go a bit wider, but what I do is when I finish writing something, I have a kind of network diagram, a kind of a kind of character link diagram that tells me which of the characters are connected to whom and why.
Okay.
And if a character who is the point of view character is not linked to most of the people in the diagram, then I don't think the person can be the main character for a story. There has to be some link between them and most of the other characters, secondary and so on, in the story. And if that doesn't exist, then really you need to question whether the person can be a main character or not.
Interesting.
So do you differentiate between here, like the point of view character and the main character? If the main character and the point of view character are different, who would have to be more connected in your diagram, or does it matter which one is most connected?
So most of the time they can be the same or different. Most of the time they are the same. But in some cases, for example, Ishmael and Ahab, all right?
Mm-hmm.
Ishmael, in Moby Dick, all right, you've got Ishmael who is the narrator. But you've got Ahab who is more or less the main character, unless you consider the whale to be the main character. But let's not go into that.
The whale's the MacGuffin, right? But in this case, they have the same network more or less because they're all on a ship together, right?
Yes.
So everyone Ishmael knows, Ahab knows, and vice versa. But if you're writing it and you make them two different characters, would you do that kind of diagram, and how would you approach it?
Because again, my writing is exploratory. I'm trying to find where I'm going. I generally write the first draft almost to completion before deciding, hang on, is this the right main character or not? And then I can pull back and decide that depending on their networks. If the narrator, the point of view character, even if the point of view character is not the main character, they have to be closely aligned to the main character. Like you said, it will still be the same. Even if they're not on a ship, it will still be the same Ishmael-Ahab type relationship, because for you to be able to narrate a story, you need to know most of the things that happen. And if the story is about the main character, then the narrator has to follow the main character, whichever device you're going to use to make that happen.
Yeah, like Nick and Gatsby in The Great Gatsby, right?
Exactly, yes.
So I would like to, for the purposes of exploring the world building a bit more, I'd like to have you explain how the telepathy works.
How the telepathy. Okay, but this is going to be spoilerific. So, if you haven't read the book, you can close your ears now.
Well, I mean, dive into world building is a little bit spoilery. So, spoiler alert. Okay, anybody who's listening to this. Close your ears if you want to protect yourself.
All right. So the way it works is this: the aliens have manufactured a fungi-like microorganism. Okay, and they have seeded the earth with this over millions and millions of years. So in the present day period, there is a network of microscopic organisms in the air and in the ground and in water that we're not aware of, or we can't see or feel or know anything, but it connects to our, to touch organ, to sense organs on our skin, and it goes from the sense organs through our nervous system up to our brains. It harvests our thoughts, and then it delivers those thoughts into the network in the air. And for the aliens, that was how they accumulated information about Earth. All right. So for them, it was a way of harvesting information about Earth so that they could know whether it was right for them to inhabit Earth. Now.
So it's basically like Facebook.
Yeah. So what then happened is, as a side effect of that, about 1% of humans had the ability to access that data, but also to communicate with each other, or rather to extract the data from people around them. So as the thoughts are going out into that network, some people are able to access that network. So it wasn't an intended effect of the alien network. It was just it was like, okay, well, yes, most people don't know about it and they can't access it, but some people can. And of that 1%, Caro happens to be the absolute best at it.
Which makes him ideal, doesn't it?
Yes,
for your purposes.
Great first point of view character, yes. Jinx.
Well, one would hope to have a main character ideally suited for his purposes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. The other thing that I really love, just it's hard to know where to start, honestly, on the things that I love about it, but let's try setting for a second. So the setting is really marvelous. Rosewater is the name of a city.
Yes.
Surrounding an alien dome.
Yes.
In Nigeria.
Yes.
Okay. Which comes with all kinds of rafts and rafts of cool information and flavors and scents and details of language.
Yes. There was. So it's interesting because the casual reader won't notice this, but you can't. I couldn't just set a story bang in the middle of Nigeria. It had to be an imaginary city because it's very easy to create offense if you set it in an existing city. It's very easy to create offense. People take it very personally, and then I'd never be able to go to Nigeria again because someone would be gunning for my head or something. So in order to avoid creating offense, I had to literally create a space just outside Lagos that doesn't actually exist, and then use that as the venue, for the dome.
Okay.
And I restricted the language that was spoken to Yoruba because that's the language that I speak. So I can make fun of my people if I want to. I can get away with that. But there are 150 languages in Nigeria, so there are lots of languages to pick from. But I restricted it for that very reason, so as not to cause offense.
Interesting.
And there's nothing like working with a language that one knows intimately. So
yes, and of course, it's not just language; it's also culture. It's one thing to understand the language, but you can't really know a language because the culture is embedded in the language itself as well. So you have to understand both the language and the culture.
Yeah.
So how do you take a real world language that you're familiar with, but many of your readers may not be, and acclimate them to that without tons and tons of info dumping?
Well, I did not want them to be. I didn't want to acclimate them to it. What I wanted to do is to make them feel alienated. I wanted to make them feel like, okay, there are aspects to this story that they will never know because they don't understand the language. There are not too many of them, but they exist there. And this was a massive fight I had to have with my editor to leave some things unknown. I'm not one of those people who think that every aspect of a story or every aspect of a narrative should be understood. I actually think that, especially if you're talking about narratives about aliens, some of those things have to be left as mysterious, as something you can't understand, because that is what being alien truly means.
Yeah.
So I want a sense. If you're going to read a story about aliens, I want a sense of alienation to follow it a little bit, not too much. It's a balance, but it has to be there. You can't understand everything. I don't want you to.
Interesting.
Excellent. Was that just out of curiosity, was that the Apex editor or the new
No,
editor?
that was the Orbit editor. That was the Orbit editor.
Cool.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is an interesting argument, right? We have to know a lot of things as the authors of the stories that the characters don't necessarily know.
Well, yes.
And yeah, I mean, so would you say that there were things that you deliberately left unknown to yourself, or simply to the characters and to readers of the story?
Oh, I am God. I know everything. I know absolutely everything. I know the color. I know the color of underwear that Kara prefers to others. All right. But like,
As a reader, I don't need to know that.
Now we're back to pants.
yes, coming back to pants. Yeah. No, like,
You really are a pantser.
totally. You know, the characters don't need to know everything, and the reader doesn't need to know everything, and you have to leave room for the reader to extrapolate. Mm-hmm. The very best world building is the one in the head of the reader. That is the best world building. So if you can get the reader to do all the work, then it's great, because one, you don't have to use unnecessary words, and two, the beauty of it, it's never going to be as pretty, as grotesque as it is in the reader's mind. Yeah. That's what I think every writer must attempt at least to tap into. Yeah. And one of the ways to tap into that is you leave hints and leave it for the reader to complete it. And I am a big fan of the idea that people who read books are not stupid. You know, I'm a big fan of that. Yeah. So I don't talk down to the people that read whatever I write. I will not do that. I will not point everything out. They're not going to be signs pointing to everything. I feel like I leave enough hints in there that if a person reads it, they will find what they want. They'll find what they need. There are enough clues there to understand what needs to be understood.
That's cool.
I like to be talked down to when I'm reading a book. You know, no. I think one of the commonest reasons I will throw a book across the room is if I think the person is talking down to me.
I just want to interject right now that I'm really excited about all this. I think I'm actually moderating a panel at Arisia in January where we're talking about the way that aliens are constructed in colonialism and colonization and other forms of the way that information is parsed out and what we expect out of readers and what it means to be a writer that's not writing for or from a perspective of being in this global centered hegemony. So I love what you're saying about not explaining everything and leaving that place of mystery and confusion. And that's really what alienation is about, and being alien and that interaction with aliens that we can't know. And so putting that into the narrative is, well, I might go so far as to say narratively dishonest, but I think that's an overstatement. But
I'll take that. I like narratively dishonest.
So I want to ask, because this is the place that I often end up discussing fiction from, do you feel that your own experience has colored the way that you would write this book, that is not the book you would have written if, I don't know if you can imagine what this book would be if you'd been a white Englishman? I mean, if somebody asked you, would you say yes, everything about your background is also contained in that book? Or do you think it just doesn't matter and that you write what you write?
Oh, it matters, definitely. So I actually don't think it's possible for this book to have been I don't think a white person could write the book like this, right? The fact that I'm black, two, the fact that I'm a black African affects the way this book came out entirely. And I think that my relationship to aliens is completely different from the one that for example, white British person might have. It's completely different. Mm-hmm. Because again, I've said this before, and others have said it too, but the people who have been colonized are actually the only people who have experienced first contact from aliens. we've had people, one, who don't look like us, and two, who are technologically advanced, appearing on our shores unexpectedly and taking, and really abducting us, experimenting on us and taking our resources and everything. And to me, that's one of the reasons why a lot of narratives about aliens reflect certain subconscious elements of whoever wrote it. So, for example, you read a lot of alien narratives that are militaristic in nature. All right, so the aliens come and then they kill the alien hordes. All right, that actually said something about the person's position with respect to being colonized. So if you think that the alien hordes have to be pacified, it says something about you. And if the aliens are not seen as individuals, as people with agency, as people who are capable of love as well as hate and as well as have their own interests, then it shows what you think about people who are not like you. Right? So there are many different ways of viewing aliens, but they are all informed by the writer's background. All of them are. It's not. People can say, "Well, I'm just writing a romp about aliens and space and stuff like that, and that there are no politics in it." That's nonsense. The mere fact that you feel you can write a story about aliens and space travel without there being politics is political, because it shows us where you are positioned in the political landscape. Because you feel politics can be removed when it can't.
Yeah.
The mere fact that you have the privilege to be able to say, "I'm not going to write about politics," that means something political. The willingness to remove politics means something political. Because if you belong to, say, an oppressed category of people, you're not going to want to remove politics. Because you're living it. Your identity is politics. You can't remove it. It's not possible. So to answer your question, then yes, it would be different if a white British person had written it than from what I've written. Everything I write it is loaded with history, even if it doesn't seem like that on the first reading. All of it is loaded with history. And if I ever get to a stage where I can write an annotated version of this book, the annotations will be larger than the book itself.
I really want the annotated version. I'm sitting here trying to plot the Kickstarter so that we can get this funded. If we can't get an editor, that sounds amazing. I argue a lot, and I talk about the fact that many writers who are not writing for a white mainstream traditional perspective are told that we have to do lots of explanation, but that the reason why everybody else who is writing for that whiteness doesn't have to is because the annotation is taught to us in every bit of our education. And so lacking that 12 years of formalized annotation, yes, I want the Tade Thompson annotated version so I can read it with I necessarily have to read it with the lens I'm coming at it from without the annotation, but I want to see that parallax between the annotation in my own context and the context of whiteness, because I there's so many different ways of approaching this thing. What's the reception been like, aside from, yes, you won an award from African readers, from Black African readers of science fiction?
Well, it's interesting. So the African Science Fiction Society, which the African Speculative Fiction Society actually loves it. They're the ones who they vote. The award is voted for, so they voted for it. And it won. Won the Best Novel award. Nobody who has read it. In fact, the very first review of it came from an African, and it was a very positive review. Nobody has come to me with anything negative to say about it. Nobody has written anything negative about it. From an African perspective, nobody's done that at all. So it's overwhelmingly been positive. Now, I say that, but I should. There's a caveat to that, because I'm very argumentative and I've got facts. So if a person has something to say to me, they really can't just come to me just ignorant, with ignorance. If someone has something to say, they need to back it up with facts and citations. So it is entirely possible. I have to give allowance to the fact that it's possible that someone might have wanted to challenge me, but they don't have the facts to do so with. Because I think no, it's true, because I think I have a reputation for that.
I see.
I don't, I don't. People come with received wisdom,
Mhm.
and I demolish this received. I have no respect for received wisdom. I have respect for history. I have respect for science. I don't really have a lot of respect for received based on some kind of verifiable fact. Um, so when you see me sometimes on forums, I'll be arguing things. Or if you see me on Facebook, sometimes I'll put something up like, "Look, don't be a fucking idiot. That's not what that means. This is what it means."
Well, I mean, you've
um,
been on my Facebook. You know my biases. So
Yeah, yes, exactly.
yeah.
So it's possible that there may be someone who disagrees with some of the things I've said, but who doesn't feel able to do that. But by and large, and people can always hide under anonymity, and nobody's done that either. So I'm guessing, I can only assume that it's been received well.
Do you consider yourself part of this Afrofuturist group, or do you how do you feel about association with that, by association by identity? Because we get asked this as racialized people within the genre.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't classify. Okay. So one, I'm not a person who joins groups. Okay, I'm not a joiner. Okay, that's one. Two, I don't actually identify myself as a particular thing. I'm a writer. That's what I can tell you. So my identity is part of writing, but I am not. I don't identify myself as I am an ex-writer, or I am, say, I don't know. I am not. I don't. So while I am proud of being black and African and the like, and I like that. I'm proud of it, and I will easily shut down people who have very poor understanding of history or poor understanding of where we have been. I will quite happily do that. Juliet knows that, she's because we're on Facebook together. But you know, I don't see the idea of me being black as linked to being a writer. I just think like, look, I'm a writer, so my blackness will come out in being a writer.
Yeah.
That said, Afrofuturism is a very difficult definition.
Right.
It has a very difficult definition, and people are still finding their way towards. And by people, I mean people who are black and who seem to be sometimes captured under that label. They're finding their way
Right.
to understanding what it means. Often people will try and go back to the original definition that Mark Derris did in his Black to the Future essay, but that's not how knowledge works. Meanings shift, significance of things shift.
Yep.
It can't mean what it used to mean in the 90s or the 80s, because we have to appropriate definitions that work for us.
Okay.
So if someone defines my work of as Afro-care, I don't mind it. I'm not going to say it isn't, right?
Right.
But I can have, I suppose, discussions about that with anybody who wants to. I am quite savvy about the history of the term. I know what it was defined as at the time. I know what I believe it means right now, and I believe it is necessary for some subsets to have that kind of identity. It helps. I suppose it helps critics to put the work in a particular context. I suppose it helps them to do that. But you always have to ask yourself, who does this definition serve? Does it serve the writers? Does it serve members of the community? Does it serve the critics? Does it serve librarians who are trying to, put the book in a particular slot? Who does it serve? And I'm not convinced at this point. Things are fluid, like I said, but I'm not convinced at this point that it is a useful category for me or my work or whatever. So while I won't actively resist it if anybody says it's Afrofuturism, I wouldn't define it as that. And like I said, that's just because I don't join things.
Right.
I'll say, look, it's a book. All right, it's a book. It's a novel. It's science fiction. You can put it wherever you want. I don't care. All right. There, for example, there are equally people who will say it's cyberpunk, right? And I love cyberpunk.
Yes.
So when I'm with people who are cyberpunk people, I talk with cyberpunk language.
Right.
That's just how it is. Does that answer your question?
Very thoroughly, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I take you back to a sort of a craft angle here for just a second, if you don't mind? I wanted to ask you, was there anything about the book that you had to do deliberate research on, or was your life experience a rich enough ground for you to grow this amazing thing out of it?
Most of it, my life experience was enough for. I needed to confirm some things because, for example, photosynthesis had changed since I learned it in school. So more was known about photosynthesis.
Was that because of
I was
invasion
shocked.
or what?
No, the types of chlorophyll and the types of photosynthesis. I'm like, when I did biology, thinking about different types, or the fact that quantum physics might be involved in the storage of the energy from photosynthesis. None of that was, I didn't know any of that because nobody taught me that in school. I thought I had a pretty good handle on photosynthesis. I then realized that actually no, I don't. Like, so much more knowledge has been added to it. So I spent a lot of time reading about that.
Interesting.
Did you also study mycology because you have a fungus-like thing?
Well, no, I didn't need to do that because I had kind of followed mycology anyway. Because I'm a doctor. I work. I had to know what fungal infections were doing as we were going on. So I didn't need to update that because I had been updating that all along. You don't really find a lot of medical doctors needing to know about chlorophyll and stuff. So I didn't keep up with that.
Like pulling energy out of the sunlight.
Yeah, exactly. I did some. A lot of it didn't make it into the book. I did a lot of reading about soil profile because I wanted to understand, okay, look, if you had an organism that big living in the soil, do you need a particular type of soil to be able to hold them in place? Would it be, did it have to be in rock? What happened to the tectonic plates? Things like that. I did some reading into that. I had to read a book on caving, on spelunking and stuff like that, because again, it didn't make it into the final book, but there are cavities in the alien that people would go exploring in and stuff. So I had to know what happened to people within caves and stuff, because I don't know anything about caves, nothing at all. So I had to read about that and so on. It like I said, it wasn't in the book, but it's part of the DNA of the book.
Interesting. Sure. Very, very cool. Okay. We've done a lot.
I want to jump into asking about Samoa, and how do you end up in Samoa?
All right. So when I finished, okay, this actually is a longer story, but the short version is this. When I was a kid, all I wanted to do was be a comic artist. Okay, sorry, that's a lie. Initially, my earliest career choice is I wanted to be Spider-Man. Okay, so when I was 5, I wanted to be Spider-Man. That was my career choice. That's what I wanted to be. And I would seriously, I would pray God, like, this is what I want to be when I grow up. All right. So at some point, somewhere along the line, I realized that, okay, this is an imaginary creature and there's no job for anybody as Spider-Man. So that's absurd. So at the grand old age of 7, I realized that I was not going to be Spider-Man. At that point, I realized, okay, well, what's the next best thing? I could draw it. So my next career choice was I was going to write and draw comics. But you don't really tell African parents that you want to become a comic artist, because they will just laugh at you. So I kind of held that as some kind of secret in my heart. and then I just, okay, what else am I interested in? I'm interested in bodies and people and stuff like that. So fine, I'll go to medical school. So I went to medical school. Not really wanting to be a doctor, just wanting to do something while I still had, I don't know, to see in my subconscious that I would be a comic artist or something. So I was actually, nobody was more surprised than myself when I came out of medical school. And here I am as a doctor, and I have no idea what I want to do with myself. So I literally looked at the map and I literally threw a dart at the map. The dart landed on Samoa, so I jumped and went to Samoa. I spent about a year there. I went to, there are 4 islands there, 2 of them inhabited. So I went to the larger island, Savai, where the population was 150,000, and I was the only doctor there between 1998 and 1999.
And so you were the only doctor on this particular island?
Yes, I was. I had lots of very experienced nurses, but I was the only actual medical officer there.
Very cool.
I love that being a doctor was your fallback plan for
Fallback.
hell of a fallback. Oh, that was my safety job.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wonderful. That is pretty.
So
pretty
when
amazing.
do we expect the graphic novel that you've drawn of your stories?
No. Of course, over the years, what I realized is that, I mean, look, don't get me wrong, okay? I have a feeling that I will still draw a graphic novel if I get the right kind of story, but drawing graphic novels is time consuming. Okay? I have a lot of respect for that profession. It is time consuming. You have to do a lot of work. You need to give it the kind of respect it deserves. And
It is.
I'll be honest with you, I don't think that I will be able to do that without, I don't know, quitting one part of my current career. Okay, so I have to either quit my job or quit writing. Quit writing novels for me to be able to do a graphic novel.
Yes.
The kind of thing that that I might be interested in.
As opposed to writing a book, which is not nearly as time consuming. Other pursuits.
Exactly.
You can crank out more scenes in an hour writing, though.
Yes,
you can. Whether they're any good depends on how your first drafts go. But so I have a world building question, which is book 2 of the Rosewater trilogy, which is a thing, is coming out at least in the U.S. in March. When you sold the book to Apex, did you sell it as a standalone? Did you always have a trilogy in mind? Is this something that happened when you sold the book to Orbit, or how did that come about? And then how did you approach world building?
All right, like I said, I already knew where the whole thing was going.
That means all 3 books. So.
I mean, yeah. So it doesn't exactly end. So the story started a lot earlier than it did in Rosewater, and it ended a lot. If you read Rosewater, you'll see that there's reference to 2012 and things that happened in London in 2012. All of that is actually rendered. I actually wrote all of that. I just kind of left it out. It's all the things that happened in London that were all actually written. All the way to the end of the 3rd book, I already knew what was going to happen and where it was going to happen and all of that. So all I did when I was presenting it to Orbit was I gave them the outlines of where it was going. I told them where the story was going, and we're going to be involved all the way to the end, at least of the 3rd book. The end of the 3rd book is not the end of the story of Rosewater. Excuse me. It's not the end of the story of Rosewater. It's more like it's a convenient point. That's what I can say. It's a convenient point. But it's not the end. It's not the end of the narrative. But it is a convenient point at which, how it is in science fiction and fantasy. We like our trilogies. So I thought it was a convenient point to stop. Yeah.
And you probably have enough narrative arcs concluding there that you're like, okay, we're good for now.
Well, it's not just that. It's also that I will never be a Robert Jordan. I can't write the same thing again and again and again. I will get bored at some point. Possibly, I might. because okay, so all 3 books are done. I finished all of them. It's possible that maybe after a few years, maybe after 3 or 4 years, I might then be sufficiently interested in it to go and render some more of it. But honestly, after writing 3 books in the same world, I need to write something else. I'm a person who, if I have to keep doing the same thing, I get bored. I'm amazed that some people can write like something, a series of 7 books or 13 books. That's amazing to me. But unless it's something like the way someone like Robin Hobb does it, where she releases a trilogy and then kind of comes back to it after a while, I could possibly do that. I could possibly do that. So in those terms, there are probably 3 or 4 more books that can come out of the world of Rosewater.
Wow.
But they're not going to come out, I can't tell you that I want to write them right now because, again, boredom, and I have other things that I want to write for the time being. But I may go back to that world. I may go back to the world.
You should definitely not feel constrained.
I won't even let that happen. One of the things when it comes to writing, one of the things I tell myself is like, look, I will do it as long as I'm interested in what I'm writing. I feel like if you're interested in what you're writing, then it will come out in the writing itself. But if you're bored of it, again, the writing itself will reflect the boredom of the writer. So I guess my advice to anybody writing is always write the thing that interests you. If it doesn't interest you, we're gonna know.
Yes.
We'll know when you phone it in.
Yeah.
Cool. So it is actually 5:00.
In California.
In California, 1 a.m. at plus 3 minutes.
It's 1 a.m. for me.
Okay.
It's 1 a.m. for me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. I would love to have you back on if you're interested to talk about book 2 when it comes out. That would be really cool.
Yeah, sure. I've had a blast. I like it here.
Let me know.
Nobody has strung me up. Nobody has tried to eat me alive. So it's great. It's always a good evening when nobody tries to kill me.
Was that an option?
Gee, you just started her off. Now we're all doomed.
We didn't even know that was like on the menu.
Oh, it was on everything. Everything was on the menu. Just let's not talk about the striptease option.
Yeah, well, okay, we will not.
Oh no!
I like talking to
That's
you in the middle of the night, Dave.
I know you're not shortlisted when people ask me for author guest Savannah. You're in trouble now.
You promised us a striptease. The Concom is mortified now.
Well, so basically, next week, let's talk about data and information.
Sounds good.
I don't know why, but that seems like something we should talk about. And just so you know, that we meet once a week at the same time. So, if you're up late and need a distraction, you're always welcome to come back for some of our topic discussions or for to hear another author talk about their work. I did want to say one more thing before we go, and that is that we are starting to I'm starting to collaborate on promotion a little bit with Writing the Other. I'm very excited about this, and it looks like what we're going to be able to do is offer discussants and guest authors and Patreon patrons a discount to do the Writing the Other class. And so I'm very, very excited about that. Coordinating with Tempest a bit, and hopefully I can get some ads from her and like advertise her class on my blog and stuff like that.
And Cynthia's part of that as well. Cynthia Ward. Yes,
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
But yes, so I'm very excited about that. So I wanted to sort of put it out there while we were still on the air. I don't have a lot of details quite yet, but I will speak to you about that once we're off the air. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Tade, tonight at a very late night.
It was a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
For putting up with us folks who are here in the afternoon, and hopefully we can do it again soon.
Can I add one thing?
Yes,
which is I noticed that at least for Americans, I don't know if it's not showing up very well. The ebook of Rosewater on Kindle and iBooks and other e-formats is $2.99 American right now.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if when this goes out, it'll still be the case, but if anyone's watching now, now's a good time to pick up.
Run out and get it.
Yeah, grab it.
That's right. All right. Thanks so much. I'll stop the broadcast.